Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live stream. This is a very special live stream between Veeam Software and VMware. And I'm joined by special guest Amanda Blevins, who's Senior Director and Chief Technologist of the Office of the CTO at VMware. Amanda, hello and good day.
Hello, thanks for having me, Dave.
Hey, it's a pleasure. I really appreciate it. So today we're going to jointly have a conversation around the evolution of data protection and virtualization with VMware and Veeam. And I really do want to emphasize conversation, meaning Amanda and I are both going to speak freely to one another, but we want to engage with you as well. So whether you're watching this on GoToWebinar or you're watching on our LinkedIn live stream, we do have people monitoring in the comments and Q&A section. We'll feed those over to us. So we'd love to make you a part of the conversation as well. If we kind of tee up what's going on, to say the very least, man, it's been an interesting, however you want to count it globally, 3 months, 4 months, any kind of time frame. Pretty clearly, the first half of this calendar year has gone very differently than many of us have expected. And that certainly has, political ramifications, economic ramifications, but in closer to our context, IT changes. We are both, as we speak, working from home in our home offices now. We're probably a little more fortunate than many out there being in IT and already being configured for this. And it's really not unusual for us. But still, do we have people globally that can't get into their data center, or at least they can't go in whenever they want? It changes how they view things. They can't rack and stack. They can't accept new equipment. They obviously have to, socially distance. So we've got interesting things going on. I just thought I would turn it over to you to see, what are you and VMware seeing in the last few months as it relates to sort of data center changes?
Yeah, I mean, you summarized it really well. The biggest changes, I would say acceleration, would be the acceleration of public cloud. So whether it's leveraging VMware technology in a hybrid cloud model to extend their current processes and footprints, or if it means leveraging native public cloud resources and refactoring applications to be good fit, that's been a big focus. However, as you mentioned, there are ramifications of what's happening, and that also means reduced spending. So trying to tackle those projects and achieve those goals while not increasing their spend, and unfortunately sometimes having to reduce their spend. So there's definitely a lot of creative approaches and focus on getting it right the first time.
Yeah. As it relates to cloud, we see a number of things happening too. And maybe if we bring up the first slide, nothing revolutionary here, but just kind of looking at some data center trends over time where initially, there was kind of an effort to collapse things a little bit, to have some standardization, to kind of reduce the footprint on-prem in the data center. Certainly, a dozen years ago, server virtualization for open systems came into mainstream. Production applications followed shortly after that. Private cloud, I always cringe, Amanda, whenever I have to say the phrase private cloud. The only thing more scary to me is just saying the cloud, because that's so many different things, right? That could mean a lot of things. But to your point, we're very, very much in a hybrid cloud, multi-cloud world, meaning multiple providers. Public cloud could very much be co-resident with private cloud and software as a service, obviously on-prem as well. Feel a bit like the genie's out of the bottle now in terms of any organization. You may be at a different point in the continuum in sort of your mix, but hard to imagine, I would think, in this time that very few organizations aren't actively embracing public cloud in a variety of ways.
Yeah. Yeah, most customers and partners that I speak to are. What's also interesting is I'm seeing a lot more edge use cases as well. So I've been speaking with a lot of pharmaceuticals and companies that do manufacturing, and especially in that industry with the pandemic occurring, that means that they need to ramp up their business and introduce new vaccines and treatments to market. And so while there might be reduced spending in other areas, managing edge workloads and edge infrastructure and edge virtualization is the same as managing a private cloud and a public cloud, and it's truly, still an extension of the hybrid cloud.
That's a really great point. I mean, if we think about that, even from potentially thousands of work from home employees, you all of a sudden now might have hundreds, if not literally thousands of VPN connections to worry about, different remote sites, hub and spoking in, or it could be something, more of a brick and mortar notion, like a full-fledged office, or even something like a regional data center. And just kind of wrapping up, where are we at now, industry trends wise? It's been a little scary if you're a vendor. And so what I mean by that, at the end of March, Gartner published software and enterprise software numbers that had certain growth percentages for all kinds of various areas within IT data center spend. Exactly 30 days later, they republished. Everything got a haircut by a net of 21%. And what I mean by that, the expectation was if, say, backup and recovery was going to grow 5%, they took it to negative 16% or a 21% swing. Thankfully, halfway through the year, VMware actually up year over year, but it does show the kind of economic challenge that's going on that might actually, I guess, encourage, hopefully not force. That's a little tough
Yeah,
of a word, but certainly make people think twice about what they're going to deploy, where they're going to deploy, and what kind of time frame that they might be on.
yeah. Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations around automation, around folks ready to look at SRE models and improving the skills of their current employees to be able to expand their capabilities, to be able to do infrastructure as code and CI/CD pipelines. Because as you automate and standardize, well, then you're spending less time doing things to keep the lights on. Like you mentioned, it's hard to rack and stack today because of a lot of restrictions or supply chain issues. But also, those are activities that don't bring a lot of value to the business. It must be done, but it's usually not a company's core business unless they are a hyperscaler or a cloud provider. So really what we like to focus on is getting folks that technology layer, that foundation, as quickly as possible and making it as easy to manage as possible. So then they can spend their time not worrying about driver updates and hypervisor updates and things like that, but instead learning SRE practices, learning to do CI/CD pipelines, learning to tie into the developer CI/CD pipelines so they're fully automated end to end.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And maybe now's a good time to show the digital foundation chart from VMware. Maybe you could walk us through that a little bit, because it encapsulates a little of what you're talking about, but also shows that, there's a lot of different devices involved. It's not just physical servers, virtualized servers, stuff in the data center as an example.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been at VMware over 10 years, and I'd say we've used a slide similar to this for our vision for at least 7 of them. And to be forthright, I think that we have been able to deliver on this vision for at least the past 5 or 6 years. And we continue to expand our portfolio organically and through acquisitions to make sure that we can fill in any gaps as new use cases come up from our customers. But really, our goal at VMware is to be able to allow you to run workloads on any cloud of your choice, whether it's VMware based or not. We do this for the edge, like I mentioned. A lot of telco services that we all use every day to place phone calls run on VMware stacks. And then, of course, we need to support the public hyperscalers and their native services and native platforms. So that's what we look at when we talk about any cloud, is to give an entire cloud management platform and suite of tools to be able to do that in one way, rather than with multiple silos for different clouds and different environments. And when we talk about any application, it's not just, can I run my applications on this platform, where you certainly can, and we support traditional applications and modern applications and allow companies to build and run their SaaS applications in our environments. But also it's about access, because you mentioned working from home. When we talk about any device, it really means that Amanda and every VMware employee and everybody that uses our platform through Workspace ONE is able to do their job from any device. They can access all of their applications and they can access all of their data. So it doesn't matter if it's a VMware issued device or if it is a one that I have at home or one that I need to borrow. I'm still able to do my job right away wherever I am. So when we say any application, it also means the access layer in from the end users.
Yeah, and that's a core tenet of Veeam's as well, meaning the flexibility to be software defined, to not dictate the infrastructure, whether at deployment or over time, to have the fluidity or the portability of data. And, if I show somewhat similar, but, maybe a little more specific to the availability world, from a Veeam perspective, we first interact, if we go to a slide where we come in from the protection angle, meaning we first interact from a protect in terms of backup or replicate or long-term retention data. But from there, we want to manage that, layer on top services. You were mentioning things like CI/CD, in support of faster organizational activity. To your point, unless you're in the business of providing infrastructure is but an expensive, time-consuming precursor to getting to what you're really in the business of doing. So we want to make that as fluid as we can. And then the reason I say run while seeking to grow and transform the business, many of us organizationally may find ourselves in just a keep the lights on, run the data center activity, which certainly we have to do. But what we'd like to do is leverage technologies like VMware's ability to take any cloud, any application, any device, and then from a Veeam perspective, support data protection, data management of that. While the next up, with Veeam, we want to allow organizations to achieve their digital transformation or DX objectives, whatever those may be. And some of those may have changed due to recent events. We'll double click on some technologies as we go, but a couple little icons in there that I think factor into our discussion now is central to Veeam's unique capabilities are around data portability and cloud mobility to reuse data. And if we bring it back to, kind of the two of us, I think there's some commonality there with VMware and Veeam and the notion of we're not looking to prescribe how you use data, not looking to prescribe the infrastructure, including cloud infrastructure that you may run on. I think it's really about having the ability to make the best decision today and then pivot to a best decision for some point in the future, which may have different circumstances around them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When I talk to folks, I tell them, when they ask questions around, well, what application should I run on-prem and what should be in the cloud? And unfortunately, I have to give the architect answer of it depends. But then I can give some pretty good guidance as to what it depends on. So one, there's the laws of physics. We need to make sure that the data can transfer at the correct speeds and the users have the right experience. So that might drive the location of the application and the data. But then it also means in the cloud, there are different services available, so you can quickly bring an application online, especially if the IT group hasn't built out their own private cloud to the extent of what is available in the public cloud. So a lot of times we focus on, in these cases, whether we need, fast velocity, we'll use hybrid or public cloud, or we need to have geolocation for data and applications because of the users. And then, for a lot of regulatory reasons, compliance, governance, on-prem is still the way to go. So at VMware, we want to make sure that you are successful in running the applications where you need to for your business, and our portfolio will help you solve that in a way that you can focus on your business versus the infrastructure and the management of the cloud.
I like that. And I like your any cloud slide because it really graphically depicts what you're describing there, how you kind of have an end-to-end ecosystem of underlying hyperscalers that you can work with today or into the future. If we bring up the any cloud slide, maybe parse us through that a little bit because I like horizontally how it lays out so many things.
Yeah. So what's important here is that we have something called Cloud Foundation, which is the virtualized infrastructure stack for compute, storage, networking, and security. And it's called Cloud Foundation because you need everything to be virtualized in your cloud so you can automate efficiently. Trying to automate against physical devices, it's hard to maintain, and just not cost effective. So Cloud Foundation is available for our customers to run on-prem and manage themselves, for them to run on-prem and have VMware to manage. And a few years ago, we started with Cloud Foundation in VMware Cloud on AWS. And that's a service where users can access VMware Cloud and AWS as an infrastructure service opportunity, and folks use it for data center evacuation when they don't want to be in the data center business. They use it for DR sites, they use it for burst capacity, and many other reasons. And so that Cloud Foundation is available to them on-prem or in AWS. And then since it was so successful, our other cloud partners have brought Cloud Foundation on board in their data centers too. So now our customers can go to Alibaba or Google or Microsoft or Oracle and the other names that you see on the screen and thousands of other cloud providers and have the same platform that they run on-prem, that their admins and SREs are used to, and be able to capitalize on that for those other application requirements. But what's very important that I do like to stress is that when we see public on the right side of the slide, we don't necessarily mean it's Cloud Foundation in our partner's data center. We actually mean it is native AWS, native Azure, native GCP, because they all have their use cases. So what's important about this slide is that consistent operations across the top when it comes to automation, self-service, security and governance, insight, application mapping, network mapping, performance capacity management, observability, all of those things, the suite and the tool sets that we provide and the processes that we help our customers establish is for all clouds, whether they're VMware based or not, because we want to take folks away from having the Azure team silo and the AWS team silo and the VMware team silo and the GCP silo. And let's get a maximum return on people's time and the tool sets that are purchased and the pipelines that are put in place. So there's one way to manage workloads and deploy workloads and secure workloads across whichever cloud environment, whether it's VMware based or not. And then because of the consistent operations, we can have the developers use those APIs and tie in their CI/CD pipelines to the infrastructure as code pipelines.
Yeah, and that's really the key, isn't it? I mean, if you want to garner developer attention, you can't dictate to them how they're going to interface with your platform. Rather, you have to give them an ecosystem. You have to give them an API set that they can tap into relatively easily and make an extension of their processes versus something sort of orthogonal coming into the side that causes them to refactor things. And if I think about from a Veeam perspective, when we think about cloud mobility, cloud portability, click up a slide here, slightly different way of looking at it. This is looking at it obviously from a Veeam perspective, but let me tell you, parse this through what we're looking to enable. Similar to that horizontal nature that you showed, Amanda, we very much want to be able to take workloads from cloud 1 to cloud 2 or cloud A to cloud B or back in just a couple steps. And that really starts from writing data in a self-describing portable manner such that it's not tied to an implementation or instantiation of where that data was born or where it was last migrated to. But be able to offer that portability, that mobility, so that as it becomes more appropriate or as tooling becomes more sufficient on certain other platforms, the business may make a decision to move there. Naturally, there are more cloud-born workloads being instantiated, whether that's software as a service or infrastructure as a service. We want to make sure we can protect those and bring that into the ecosystem of portable data as well. But we're seeing still a number of organizations, of course, remain on-prem, but would like to flex into the cloud, either for longer-term data retention or as an air gap mechanism. Unfortunately, cyber, which we'll get to in a little bit here, remains a top concern. And the ability to have an offline air-gapped, known good copy of your data is important now more than ever. I'm more of a technologist, so I don't really like talking about pricing or licensing because it makes my head hurt, but I do appreciate the fact that it's a very real world problem. The last thing I'll highlight as it relates to cloud is Veeam has really gone in heavily in the last year and a half on a couple different now licensing models. We've settled on this one, a Veeam universal license. Short story is we don't want to penalize anyone for where they first deployed Veeam and deployed their data management services. If you started on-prem and you want to take it to cloud 1, great. And if that's cloud 2 tomorrow, that's great as well. So, I saw you mentioned the phrase intrinsic security a couple times, I think, in the slides. And I think that might be a good segue because it always seems like if someone mentions cloud in one breath, the next is going to be, but what about security? What about cyber? What about leakage or whatever phrase you want to use of something bad that can happen? Now, when VMware says intrinsic security, could you kind of parse this through? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great slide to illustrate it. But really what we focus on is trying to build security processes and features into existing products that provide network capabilities or device management, application management capabilities, or identity, or cloud governance. So we have services and products that satisfy that, but it's also not saying, hey, this is a security bolt-on. For it to be intrinsic, it needs to be a natural approach and a natural progression of, okay, I'm familiar with the technology, I've virtualized my network. Now what virtual security can I add into my applications? And also when it's intrinsic, it means that it's not added into the application that's built afterwards either. It needs to be part of that pipeline. Just like, a big part of a pipeline is making sure my application and my data is available at all times, and so I'm backed up, I can restore, I have my DR processes in place. It's the same thing with security, where I need to make sure that the environment that I'm deploying to is secure. It follows the governance that I need for my business or my organization, and I have the observability and the ability to automate when something looks awry in my environment. So I don't need a person to touch every time there might be an issue. I need to be able to automate through that in the SRE model to say, okay, there's a violation of this rule, it's been auto-detected, we've done the auto-remediation, and now it's available for our analysts to review and determine what we should do long-term. So our goal is to make sure that we have these types of solutions in our portfolio to make security easy throughout the day rather than an add-on on top of an already stack that's doing a lot of things.
Yeah, I like that because, I always like to say, I'm not a security person. I've been a backup person for 31 years, but now more than ever, every one of us have a role to play in security. Just because your role is X doesn't mean it's mutually exclusive of needing to ensure the intellectual property, that the data is well taken care of in your environment. And I kind of think about security like I think about performance. You're never done. You're all performance. All you do is you remove one bottleneck to expose, the next one downstream, and you kind of keep playing whack-a-mole to the extent that you need to. Security, has that notion as well. I mean, there's perimeter security. There's the need for electronic insider threats. There's phishing, etc. And a quick sidebar: we recently got our first chief information security officer at Veeam, and his name is Gil Vega. And prior to that, he was at Citibank, so it was a financial thing. Prior to that, he helped from a cyber perspective secure the United States' global nuclear stockpile of weapons. And I was thinking, that sounds pretty heavy duty. What's that like? And he said, it's no different actually than security in any other organization. Your goal is to make yourself less attractive of a target. Your goal is to keep closing loops. And he described this NIST framework for, trying to attack that. But I like your phrase, or VMware's phrase, that of intrinsic security, that it's inbuilt, it's just part and parcel with activities that you're already going to be doing anyway. And I think that's maybe one of the keys is as soon as something becomes orthogonal, you're in trouble. Like,
Right.
who's going to make that dependent step?
Right, absolutely. And to use the example of outside threats, I mean, you think that hackers have botnets of millions of bots or tens of thousands of bots, right? And they have automation and they have teams of people just looking for vulnerabilities everywhere. And for humans to respond to that, just the law of averages, the math behind it, there's no way that humans can keep up against automated botnets that are attacking their environment. So needing that intrinsic security, needing security tools that are smart and can automate and can remediate a lot of these issues or even prevent them from coming up in the first place is extremely important to a company's security posture.
Yeah, and if I look at it from a Veeam perspective, as with VMware, I mean, we could probably have an entire webcast on security as it relates to the portfolios because it is that ingrained. But if I think of Veeam data security and compliance, a couple of things do want to highlight is, a few technologies. One is we call it data labs, Amanda. It's just the ability that Veeam created now a decade ago to instantly stand up a copy of your backup data and instantly access it. So it's more of a resume versus a restore. So it's like an on-demand sandbox. We can, network fence that off if it's appropriate. But from that kind of technology, and we've been iterating on that literally for 10 years, making it even faster, making it require even less infrastructure, meaning you can achieve this without having to be on solid state drives. But there's some interesting things we can do, like ensuring that your backup or your replication is correct, that copy is indeed matching the original source. So I like to joke, you can't take 3 backups and if they're bad, have that reassembled into one good backup that you can restore. The only time that you can really go get a good backup is at first capture. So these are technology, sure backup, sure replica, to make sure at the point you do capture data that you've got what you need. Now, on the other end of that, there are some things we can do from a compliance angle, like GDPR and things like that, right to be forgotten. We can scrub out data using this process and a facility we call stage restore. But secure restore is kind of a neat one. Again, I mean, I am no security person, but I found out about a year and a half ago, a lot of these security threats, they actually have, antidotes or remediation within 24 hours after being discovered. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's just mind-boggling to me. But the catch is, of course, that the average data center, and even more so, like the average person at home, is not anywhere near up to date on their antivirus, software. I
Mm-hmm.
saw something this morning that said, and oh, by the way, home routers are even worse, running very, very old copies of an operating system, not patched, default passwords right and left.
Yeah.
So, from a restore perspective, there's some things we can do to, network off something and then update with the latest virus definition. Literally just tell Veeam, hey, go run. If you find a problem, either stop and leave it in place unattached for the forensic team to take a look at, or if you can remediate against it, keep going. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stop for a second because 10 has a question. What are some of the best resources, practices for business owners looking forward to taking advantage of these technologies? So I'll answer after you, but Amanda, from 10's question, if you were, let's say, a small business owner, but IT savvy, how would you begin a framework for adopting some of what we've talked about?
Well, I mean, there's so many ways. So I think it depends if the person is more of a self-learner or somebody that's more of an auditory interaction kind of learner. So for me, I'm more of I just want to consume as much information as possible and read as much as possible. So, from a VMware perspective, our website contains our entire portfolio, the use cases that it solves, white papers, technical data sheets for higher level executive reading. And then, we can go out to YouTube where we host a lot of videos and demos and how-tos. But if you're the type that wants to interact and talk to folks about it, maybe at the beginning or after you set a foundation for yourself, then just reach out to VMware or reach out to your partner of choice, and we have a relationship with those partners, and we can come up with the right solutions together. And I don't want to spoil the end of this, but one of the things that we'll show at the end is that VMworld registration is open. And it is 100% online, and you can register for free and have access to a ton of content this year and content from previous years. So there's no shortage of information. It's usually taking all that information and creating a solid strategy, which is where the conversation part with ourselves and our partners is very important.
Nice. Yeah. And I want to double click on VMware. I see we've got the byline down there below. I mean, Obviously VMworld is associated with VMware, but I view it as an industry show. When I was before joining Veeam, when I was an industry analyst in storage, I remember looking up and I looked at all the banners and I thought, how is this not a storage event? Because you see everybody, you see networking companies and storage companies of various types, and obviously operations management. It goes on, but it is a fantastic mix of topics, of vendors, of to your point, information sharing that really is bar none. Now, before I answer Chen's question, I do want to get another one. In terms, question from Ogun, what are you doing for the transition in 0 seconds in disaster scenarios? So 0 it truly depends. If your tolerance is near 0, then you're really in a failover scenario. You're probably in a hot, active kind of an environment. I think Amanda alluded to automation earlier. Certainly on a Veeam perspective, we have something we call Veeam Availability Orchestrator. I mean, it's an automation platform. It can just take our known good copies of data in a variety of ways. It could be replicas, meaning software replication. It could be backups. You can flex into DRing, or it can be storage array snapshots. But if you're truly in a 0 second to near 0, up the street from where I normally live is American Express. I normally am in Arizona, and in the Phoenix area, for some of their workloads, literally they cannot lose a transaction. And there's a way to architect for that. But as you'd imagine, it comes with cost and requirements from infrastructure, from people, from networking, etc. But I want to go back to Ten's question. It's not, my answer won't be dissimilar from yours, Amanda, in that Veeam has a lot of different resources out on the web, including no charge versions of all of our products. We have over 1 million downloads now for our Windows agent, whether that's a physical agent or running on a virtualized environment. And so one way to get started is just to try the product and see, how that works for you, if it meets your needs. We have an online university of no charged materials as well. And I'll save a little call back. We're calling ahead or teasing ahead VMworld, but I'll tell you about some other resources later coming up. Now, I also do want to mention, before I jump off of the near 0 kind of question too rapidly, is continuous data protection, or CDP, is something that we have been demoing for some time. We just announced at our event a couple weeks ago our intent in the next version of Veeam to be able to offer through the VIO interface, Amanda, the real CDP capabilities for the higher kind of most stringent workloads that really can't suffer any kind of downtime. Now, Amanda, I should ask you, are you okay talking about Carbon Black, or are we best pushing on to some other real world examples?
We have a lot of Carbon Black resources and events online. We can talk about it at a high level, but I would want the right folks to do it justice, depending on the question or the topic.
Gotcha. Yeah. So let's just point to that. There are no shortage of online resources between the two companies, and that might be a good place. You mentioned the VMware portfolio. You've got a really nice slide that kind of shows all the pieces in this puzzle here. Maybe we could bring that up.
Yeah. So I think one thing that folks don't realize is that we do a lot more than just a hypervisor. So I'm not quite, I don't know what the question was around Carbon Black, but that acquisition was very important to us and is very important to us still, because we can build the knowledge that Carbon Black brought to us, and we continue to have with the security folks that are part of the company, to be able to use that knowledge and use that information not just as a standalone solution. And Carbon Black, with threat detection at the most advanced model, to be able to click through to see exactly what processes and operating systems were infected throughout the environment to get to what the issue was today, is extremely impressive. So if you haven't seen that in action, definitely check it out. It's for advanced security folks, but I haven't seen anything like it. So, but my point is that Carbon Black not only has its own standalone capabilities and protections, for personal devices and corporate devices, But we also use this information in our other solutions in the virtual cloud network and NSX to be able to make sure that those products are secure in our digital workspace with Workspace ONE. So even though you see these puzzle pieces and they're in a few different boxes, the integration across all of those is very important, and the interoperability and creating the pipelines and other approaches that make sure that you leverage the different components for what you're trying to achieve is very important. So here we have the application modernization, which is our Tanzu line, and that contains the acquisitions from Pivotal and Heptio and our upstream Kubernetes and Kubernetes management and observability and other development platforms in there. We have the multi-cloud approach, which has Cloud Foundation, the cloud management platform, not just to manage VMware environments, but also native public clouds. The virtual cloud network, so we can secure and have insight into all of our network traffic around the globe, not just virtual machines. And we also have VeloCloud SD-WAN. I live out in a rural area and my internet connection isn't very good, so VeloCloud and SD-WAN for that optimization of my packet transfer is very, very important. And we did talk about the intrinsic security. So I don't want folks to think of this as, oh, I only need to this part or I only want this part. There are pieces that fit together. And on top of that, if you already have a solution in place that does something similar and that's your go-to solution, you're happy with that, that's great. I'm 99% confident that that solution is provided by a company that's a partner of ours, and we probably already have some sort of integration. So we do make that automation, that deployment, and that management much easier.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, and I like how Carbon Black, or the intrinsic security piece, is literally a middle puzzle piece connected to absolutely everything else, connective tissue to the rest of the portfolio. I should point out that one of our colleagues did also update on Carbon Black in the chat as well. So I think we, between the two of you, got that one pretty well addressed. I had a question come in from Jeff, and Jeff asks, what is the most cost-effective way? And those always scare me. Most anything absolutely terrifies me. But let's keep going. What is the most cost-effective way to architect a solution for DR backup and quick restoration with data residing on-prem and is static? So there's a couple different approaches. You know, every architect is going to say it depends, and sadly, it's because it often does depend. It depends a little bit on your infrastructure, your data, what the requirements might be, what you have to work with, and or what you're willing to spend additionally to try to achieve your goals. But for Jeff, I would say if you've got a relatively static workload, there's a couple things you could do in particular with Veeam. You could keep most recent copy on-prem, and you can pick the time frame. That could be 2 weeks worth, it could be a month's plus worth of data, and have that ready for fast access. Thankfully, locality of reference says 98% of the time, every restore operation you do will be satisfied the vast majority of time by something within about 12 days or less. That's like in the 97, 98% time frame. However, if you essentially have a cache miss, then one of the benefits of Veeam is you can stream data from cloud to on-prem access, so you don't have to wait for the full data to restore before you get access to first byte. So long story short there, I would tier it, keep most recent data on site, push other data to another media type, could be tape, could be public cloud. If it is public cloud, we can get live stream to that really rapidly. And that kind of brings into our last section, which is, Amanda, kind of real world use cases. I mean, we just talked about a few of them really in the last few minutes right there. But I'd like just to throw it over to you from a VMware perspective. You know, a lot of what I hear you describing is we don't want to dictate to data centers what they're going to do, what they have to do, when they have to do something. But if we kind of come to a close here and think from a real world perspective, how would you kind of button that up from a VMware side?
Yeah, so I like to remind folks that VMware, we have hundreds of products in our portfolio now, but only 2 of them require our hypervisor to function. So, and they're related to storage. And so everything else that we do around security and networking and modern applications, observability, performance, etc., even if you decided that your workloads were not going to land on a VMware platform, a virtualized infrastructure platform, we still give you the same capabilities. We still work with you and support you and form that partnership with you to achieve what you need for your business. So we like to, of course, we have opinions, and of course, we want you to use our technology, but we know it's not always the right fit for many reasons. And so we like to partner with you to make sure that the solutions that you leverage from us fit well into the portfolio of your environment, of the capabilities of your folks, and then we create a plan together to move forward in a roadmap to make sure that you're meeting your business objectives.
I love that. If we bring up the Veeam portfolio slide, is again paralleling what you're describing from VMware incredibly nicely, in that we want to be able to support workloads up above, cloud-based, SaaS-based, virtual, physical, much like VMware, certainly best known for something in the past, meaning hypervisor in VMware's case. Veeam very much focused on protecting VMware initially, but I think both companies have really expanded beyond that. Now, not apologetic or in any way moving away from past heritage whatsoever, but layering on even additional value-added management services on top of that. And from a Veeam perspective, it really starts with backup and recovery, backup and replication, participates with cloud mobility, that data portability aspect, monitoring and analytics, such things as being able to indicate that we have an unusual rate of change in resource consumption. This could be indicative of malicious cyber activity. The orchestration and automation that I mentioned, particularly in a DR scenario, but that could be supporting things like DevOps, having fresh copy of your data every morning for the team to be able to go and do application development on. And then, of course, governance and compliance and security plays a role in that as well. So as we begin to wrap up, we have teased it. Let's now do a full-on slide as it relates to VMworld coming up. It's a few months away, but I know that the agenda is about to be released here in a few weeks, I believe.
Yeah, so in just a couple weeks, you'll be able to see our content catalog live online, so you can register today, and then we'll let you know when that's available so you can start organizing your schedule. We're going to have a lot of great content for you, covering all the topics and more that we talked about today, and we'll certainly have our partners like Veeam there as well.
Awesome. And what's so great about being a virtual event is literally everyone can attend this. You don't have to get to Barcelona. You don't have to get to Las Vegas. You don't have to incur expenses and travel issues that you might in the past. It's literally information that's right there for you to consume and absorb. And if we do a call back, we did complete Veeam On. We intended also to be in Vegas to return there this year, but best laid plans. And so we, a couple of weeks ago, had our multi-day event for the next several months. Those sessions, including sessions with VMware, are going to be available. It's very easy. It's at www.veeam.com, Veeam On, or if you just search Veeam On, all is one word, you'll get right there. Couple of things to point out, in addition to multi-cloud capabilities we've been talking about, in addition to having a great discussion from Sonali Desai around VMware Cloud on AWS from VMware. There's just a whole host of customer examples and partner examples as well. So as we come to close, I just want to say, man, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with us. Really enjoyed it, and hope we'll be able to get to do this sometime again in the future.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you again, potentially even this Friday, where we're going to have a live stream with Gilbert Lowe and Jim Tedesco talking about maximizing your Veeam experience. And again, do not forget to keep an eye on VMworld with the actual complete tracks coming out in the next handful of weeks. So it's not too early to be thinking about how you're going to map out your learning and your approach to handling all that great content that's going to be coming your way. Thank you very much.